I'm Judy Warren, 35 years old, a financial manager in Buffalo. I had just gone through a messy divorce that left me raw and scarred. Hoping to bring my family closer together, I spent $22,000 on a summer vacation in Hawaii for my parents and my sister. I imagined us on the beach laughing, washing away the pain of the past year. My hands trembled as I dialed the number, excited to hear about the trip I had fully paid for. The phone rang twice before my mom picked up. "Hi, Mom," I said brightly. "How's the Hawaii trip planning going?" "I can't wait." There was a long pause. Then, in a flat tone, she said, "Oh, we already went last week. Only for family." I froze. Only for family? Wasn't I family? Over the past 2 years, I had spent a total of $72,000, $22,000 for that trip, another $50,000 for their rent, bills, furniture, everything just to keep them afloat. And yet they cut me out without a word, without even inviting me. The betrayal cut deeper than my divorce. I had given everything, just hoping for love, only to be shut out. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I swore I wouldn't let this go. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring out at the snowy Buffalo streets. I couldn't shake the weight of my mother's words from earlier that day. The sting of being excluded from the Hawaii trip I'd paid for was bad enough, but it was the deeper cut, knowing I'd been pouring my heart and wallet into my family for years, that kept me awake. After my divorce 6 months ago, I'd clung to the idea that family would be my anchor. Instead, they'd left me adrift. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank records, something I hadn't done in months. The numbers stared back at me, cold and undeniable. Over the past 2 years, I'd sent $72,000 to my parents and sister. The Hawaii trip alone was $22,000, flights, a beachfront hotel, even snorkeling tours I'd never get to enjoy. The other $50,000 covered their rent for a crumbling Buffalo apartment, utility bills, groceries, and a used car for my sister when her old one broke down. I'd written check after check, thinking it was my duty, my way of keeping us together after my marriage fell apart. My ex-husband's lawyer had called me too generous during the settlement, and I'd brushed it off. Now I wondered if he'd seen something I hadn't. I scrolled through the transactions, $200 for rent here, $800 for a car repair there, $500 for a family emergency my sister never explained. Each one felt like a brick in a wall I'd built between my own dreams and their demands. I'd been so focused on fixing their lives that I hadn't noticed how little they gave back. My mother's voice, calm, dismissive, echoed in my head. She hadn't even apologized for leaving me out. My father hadn't called to check on me. My sister, always quick to text for money, hadn't mentioned the trip at all. The realization hit hard. They didn't see me as family. Not really. I was their bank account. Nothing more. I thought back to the months after my divorce, when I'd sit in my office late, crunching numbers to make sure I could cover their bills and mine. I'd canceled my own plans, weekend getaways, a new couch, even therapy sessions, to keep their lights on. I'd told myself it was temporary, that they'd appreciate it, that we'd be closer for it. But the Hawaii trip proved otherwise. They'd taken my money, planned their escape to paradise, and left me behind in Buffalo's gray slush. My chest tightened, not just from the betrayal, but from the shame of not seeing it sooner. I'd been naive, thinking love could be bought with dollars. I called Ms. Judith Walsh, my financial advisor at the bank, and asked for a meeting first thing tomorrow. "I need to review my accounts," I told her, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Come by at 9 o'clock." I hung up, feeling a flicker of control for the first time that day. If my family thought they could keep taking without giving, they were about to learn otherwise. I wasn't just hurt, I was done being their safety net. A month later, my phone lit up with my sister Elaine's name. I was sorting through work files in my Buffalo apartment, trying to focus, but seeing her name made my stomach twist. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, not since I'd started questioning everything. I answered, bracing myself. Elaine's voice was all charm, like she was asking for a small favor. "Judy, the landlord's on my case again," she said, her tone light. "Rent's overdue, about $2,000. Can you send it today? I'm really stuck." Her words dripped with fake urgency, as if I owed her this without question. I clenched my jaw, picturing her lounging in her apartment, expecting me to fix her problems like always. I didn't hesitate. Only for family, remember? I said, my voice sharp, cutting through her act. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Elaine let out a forced laugh. What's that supposed to mean? We're family. Judy, don't make this weird. Her tone shifted, a mix of annoyance and coaxing, like she could sweet-talk me into compliance. I saw through it. She hadn't reached out to check on me. Not once. Not even after everything I'd done for her. Her call wasn't about family. It was about my bank account. I'm done bailing you out, I said, and ended the call before she could argue. My hands shook, but I felt a surge of clarity. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me anymore. I opened my banking app right away, my fingers moving fast. I'd set up automatic transfers years ago to cover their rent, $200 every month wired straight to their landlord. I scrolled to the recurring payment section and hit cancel on each one, watching the confirmations pop up. Then I tackled the other autopays, $300 for Elaine's car insurance, $200 for their phone bill, even smaller ones for their internet. Each click felt like shedding a weight I'd carried too long. I double-checked to make sure every transfer was stopped, my resolve hardening. They'd have to figure out their own bills now. I called Ms. Judith Walsh, my financial advisor, to make sure everything was secure. Ms. Walsh, it's Judy, I said, keeping my voice steady. I need to lock my accounts completely. No more access for anyone. She was all business as usual. I've got you. Ms. Warren, can you come to the bank this afternoon? I agreed, grabbing my coat and heading out. The bank was a short drive away, and Ms. Walsh had a stack of paperwork ready when I arrived. She walked me through the process, new access codes, two-factor authentication, and alerts for any unusual activity. This will block any external attempts to touch your accounts, she explained, her pen tapping the forms I needed to sign. I nodded, signing each page, feeling a sense of finality. You're taking control, Ms. Walsh said, her voice soft but firm. That's not easy. I gave a small smile, grateful for her support. Sitting there, I thought about how Elaine's call had pushed me to this point. Her fake sweetness wasn't new. She'd always known how to play the role of the struggling sister, leaning on me whenever money got tight. But this time, her call felt like a slap, a reminder that she saw me as a resource, not a person. I'd spent years trying to prove my worth to them, thinking my support would earn their respect. Instead, they'd taken it for granted, assuming I'd always say yes. As I signed the last form, I realized I wasn't just protecting my money, I was protecting my future. I wasn't going to let them drain me anymore. When I left the bank, I felt a quiet strength. Elaine's call had been a bold move, but it backfired. I wasn't the same Judy who'd write checks without question. I knew they'd try again, probably with more than just a phone call, but I was ready. I'd locked my accounts, drawn my line, and I wasn't turning back. The next morning, I was making coffee when I heard cars pulling up outside. The sound of doors slamming made me pause, my mug halfway to my lips. I peered through the blinds of my apartment and saw them, my father, my mother, Elaine, and a man in a suit stepping out of a sleek black sedan. My pulse quickened. I knew this wasn't a social visit. After cutting off their payments yesterday, I'd expected a reaction, but not this fast, and not like this. I set the mug down, steeling myself as the doorbell buzzed, sharp and insistent. I opened the door, and there they stood. My mother's face was pinched, her arms crossed. My father shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. Elaine stepped forward, her expression a mix of defiance and fake concern. Judy, we need to talk, she said, her voice dripping with forced sincerity. The man in the suit introduced himself as Mr. Thomas Hayes, their lawyer, his briefcase clutched like a weapon. Ms. Warren, your family is concerned about your recent decisions, he said, his tone clipped. We're here to discuss your financial obligations. Obligations? The word hit like a punch. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to demand I keep funding their lives. Elaine cut in before I could respond. You can't just stop helping us, she said, her voice rising. We're family. You owe us. My mother nodded, her lips tight. You've always taken care of us. Judy, don't turn your back now. My father finally spoke, his voice gruff. We need that money to get by. Judy, be reasonable. I felt the air thicken, their words pressing in, trying to guilt me into submission. But I wasn't the same woman who'd written checks without question. I straightened, meeting their eyes. "I don't owe you anything," I said, my voice steady. "You made that clear when you left me out of your plans. Get out." Elaine's face twisted, like she couldn't believe I'd said no. "You're being selfish," she snapped. "Mr. Hayes raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. "Ms. Warren, we can resolve this legally if needed. Your family depends on your support." The threat hung heavy, but I didn't flinch. "Then take it to court," I said, stepping back. "You're not welcome here." I shut the door in their faces, my heart pounding as I turned the lock. Their voices rose outside, arguing, but I didn't listen. I was done letting them bully me. I grabbed my phone and searched for a local hardware store, my fingers moving fast. I found one a few blocks away and called. "Hi, I need new locks for my apartment door and a security camera system," I told the hardware store clerk, a man with a gruff but helpful tone. "Can you get someone out today?" He promised a technician by noon and gave me a rundown of deadbolts and cameras, motion activated, cloud storage, the works. I felt a rush of relief, knowing I was taking steps to protect myself. "We'll send Mike over," he said. "He's our best." I thanked him and hung up, already clearing space by the door for the installation. By noon, Mike arrived, toolbox in hand. He was a stocky guy in his 40s, efficient and no nonsense. "Heard you need some security," he said, inspecting my door. I nodded, explaining I wanted to keep unwanted visitors out. He didn't pry, just got to work swapping out the old lock for a heavy-duty deadbolt and setting up a camera above the door. "This'll catch anyone who comes near," he said, showing me the app to monitor the feed. I watched him test the system, the camera's red light blinking, and felt a sense of control I hadn't had in years. "Thanks, Mike," I said, signing the invoice. He nodded and left, leaving me with a fortified apartment and a clearer head. I sat down, the new key in my hand, and realized how far I'd come in a day. They'd come to my door, thinking they could intimidate me, but I'd held my ground. I wasn't just locking them out of my home, I was locking them out of my life. They could bring their lawyer, their demands, whatever they wanted. I was ready to fight back. 2 days later, I walked into the book club meeting at the Buffalo Library. My nerves were still raw from the confrontation with my family, but I needed a break, a moment to breathe among people who didn't see me as a walking wallet. The room was warm, filled with the familiar faces of my book club friends, Martha, Lois, and Evelyn. They greeted me with smiles, but my best friend Janet caught my eye right away. She pulled me aside before we started discussing the latest novel. "Judy, you look like you're carrying the world," she said, her voice soft but direct. I sighed, knowing I couldn't hide from her. I spilled everything, the way my family had shown up at my door with a lawyer, demanding I keep paying their bills. I told Janet how I'd stood my ground, shut the door in their faces, and had the locks changed. Her eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt, just nodded, letting me vent. When I finished, she squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," she said firmly. "They don't get to treat you like that." Her support felt like a lifeline, pulling me out of the isolation I'd been sinking into. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to just listen. Janet leaned back, her expression turning serious. "You know, I went through something similar a few years ago," she said. "My brother kept asking for loans, car repairs, rent, you name it. I gave in for years, thinking it was my job to help. Then I found out he was blowing the money on vacations and new gadgets while I was scraping by. I cut him off, and he tried to guilt me, saying I was abandoning family. Sound familiar?" I nodded, stunned at how close her story hit. "What did you do?" I asked. Janet's eyes hardened. "I got a lawyer, set boundaries, and never looked back. You need to protect yourself, Judy. They're not done with you." Her words sank in, heavy but clear. I'd locked my accounts and my apartment, but a lawyer at my door meant they were escalating. Janet didn't sugarcoat it. "They'll try to bully you into giving in, maybe even legally," she said. "You need someone in your corner." She scribbled a name on a napkin. Mr. Robert Lawson, a lawyer she'd worked with when her brother got pushy. "He's sharp, doesn't mess around," she said. "Call him today." I tucked the napkin in my pocket, feeling a spark of determination. I sat in my car outside Mr. Lawson's office, gripping the steering wheel as rain streaked across the windshield. If my family was planning something, I wasn't going to face it alone. That afternoon, I'd called his office, and his receptionist had patched me through. His voice came on, calm and professional. "Ms. Warren, how can I help you?" I explained the situation, my family's demands, the lawyer they'd brought, the years of relying on me like I was their personal ATM. I didn't go into every detail, just enough for him to grasp the stakes. "Sounds like you're dealing with financial manipulation," he said, his tone matter of fact. "I've seen cases like this. Can you come in tomorrow?" I agreed, setting an appointment for 10 a.m. Before we hung up, he asked for any documents I had, bank statements, payment records, anything showing what I'd given them. "We'll need to know what we're up against," he said. The next morning, I met Mr. Lawson at his office downtown. He was in his 50s, with a no-nonsense demeanor and a desk stacked with files. "Let's get to it," he said, motioning for me to sit. I handed over a folder with records of the payments I'd stopped, rent, insurance, phone bills. He flipped through them, his brow furrowing. "This is substantial," he said. "You've been supporting them for years. Any communication since you cut them off?" I told him about the confrontation at my door, the lawyer's threats. He leaned back, tapping his pen. "I did some digging after your call yesterday," he said. "Your family's lawyer, Thomas Hayes, filed a preliminary motion. They're claiming you're unfit to manage your finances, saying your recent actions are erratic. They want control of your assets." My stomach dropped. Unfit, erratic. The words felt like a betrayal all over again. I'd been nothing but responsible, working overtime to keep them afloat while rebuilding my life. Mr. Lawson saw my face and raised a hand. "Don't worry yet," he said. "This is a tactic to scare you. We can fight it. You've got evidence, your job, your records, your actions. We'll build a case." He outlined the next steps: gathering more documentation, contacting my bank for verification, and preparing for a possible hearing. "They're trying to strongarm you," he said, "but you're not alone in this." I left his office feeling shaken but focused, clutching a list of tasks he'd given me. Back at the library that evening, I told Janet what I'd learned. She didn't flinch. "They're desperate," she said. "You're standing up to them, and they hate it. Keep going." Martha, Lois, and Evelyn overheard, offering their own encouragement. "You're stronger than they think," Lois said, her voice warm. Their support steadied me like a shield against whatever my family had planned. I wasn't just fighting for my money, I was fighting for my right to live free of their control. On a rainy Thursday, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I froze, my hand on a stack of work papers in my apartment. The new security camera app pinged, showing a woman in a gray coat standing at my door. I checked the feed, professional, clipboard in hand. No sign of my family. I opened the door to find Ms. Sarah Coleman, a social worker, her expression polite but guarded. "Ms. Warren, I'm here to discuss a report about your recent behavior," she said, her voice neutral. "May I come in?" My stomach twisted. "A report?" I let her in, my mind racing to what my family could have done now. Ms. Coleman sat on my couch, pulling out a notepad. "Your sister Elaine contacted our office," she said. "She claims you've been acting erratically, making impulsive financial decisions that affect your family's stability. We need to assess your well-being." The word stung, a calculated jab from Elaine to paint me as unstable. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "I'm fine," I said. "This is about my family trying to control my money." Ms. Coleman nodded, jotting something down. "I'll need to ask a few questions and review any relevant documents," she said. "This is standard procedure." I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mr. Lawson, putting him on speaker. "Mr. Lawson, I've got a social worker here," I said, explaining Elaine's report. His voice came through, calm and authoritative. "Ms. Warren, don't worry. Provide Ms. Coleman with your work and financial records. I'll join you shortly." I thanked him and hung up. Turning to Ms. Coleman, "I have everything you need," I said, pulling out a folder I'd prepared after meeting Mr. Lawson. It held my job performance reviews, bank statements showing my stable savings, and pay stubs from my role as a financial manager. "I've been managing my finances responsibly," I told her. "My sister's upset because I stopped paying her bills." Ms. Coleman reviewed the documents, her pen moving quickly as she took notes. "These are thorough," she said, her tone softening slightly. Your employment history looks solid, 10 years at your firm. No issues. I nodded. I've been promoted twice, I said, handing her a letter from my boss praising my work on a recent project. She flipped through my bank records, noting the consistent deposits and lack of overdrafts. This doesn't suggest erratic behavior, she admitted, but added, I'll need to verify this with your employer and bank. I gave her the contact details, confident they'd back me up. My life wasn't perfect, but it was stable, and I'd worked hard to keep it that way. Mr. Lawson arrived 20 minutes later, his briefcase in hand. Ms. Coleman, I represent Ms. Warren, he said, shaking her hand. He sat beside me, pulling out a legal pad. This report is part of a pattern of harassment by Ms. Warren's family, who are upset she's asserting her financial independence. He handed Ms. Coleman a copy of the motion filed by their lawyer, Thomas Hayes, claiming I was unfit to manage my money. This is a baseless attempt to manipulate her, he said. Ms. Coleman read the motion, her brow furrowing. I'll include this in my report, she said, but my focus is Ms. Warren's current state, not legal disputes. Mr. Lawson nodded. Then you'll see she's fully capable. After Ms. Coleman left, promising to follow up, I felt a mix of relief and frustration. Elaine's report was a low blow, but I'd handled it. I called Martha, Lois, and Evelyn, my book club friends, and asked them to meet me at a coffee shop nearby. When I arrived, they were already there, their faces full of concern. I told them about the social worker's visit and Elaine's accusation. Martha reached across the table, her hand on mine. They're trying to wear you down, she said, but you're stronger than that. Lois nodded. You've got your head on straight. Judy, don't let them make you doubt yourself. Evelyn, usually quiet, spoke up. We've got your back. Whatever you need, we're here. Their words wrapped around me like a shield, easing the knot in my chest. That evening, sitting in my apartment, I felt a quiet resolve. Elaine's report was a desperate move, but it hadn't shaken me. With Mr. Lawson's help and my friends' support, I was ready for whatever came next. I wasn't just defending my money, I was defending my right to live free. 3 weeks later, I stepped into the courtroom, my heart pounding. The Buffalo courthouse was cold, its wooden benches creaking as I sat beside Mr. Lawson. Across the room, Elaine and my father sat with their lawyer, Thomas Hayes, their faces set in grim determination. They'd pushed this far, claiming I was unfit to manage my finances, and now it was up to Judge William Carter to decide. I clutched the folder of evidence Mr. Lawson and I had prepared, proof of my stability, my career, my life. I wasn't here to beg, I was here to fight. Mr. Hayes stood first, his voice smooth as he addressed the court. Ms. Warren's recent actions, cutting off financial support to her family, show erratic decision-making, he said. She's left them in hardship, ignoring her responsibilities. Elaine took the stand, her eyes avoiding mine. Judy's always been generous, she said, her voice trembling for effect. But lately, she's been unpredictable, shutting us out without reason. Clarence followed, his tone gruff. She's not herself, he said. We're worried about her, and we need to protect her assets. Their words twisted the truth, painting me as unstable, but I kept my face calm, trusting Mr. Lawson's plan. Mr. Hayes called their first witness, Gary Simmons, a former co-worker of Clarence's. I've heard Judy's been acting strangely, Gary said, shifting in his seat. Clarence told me she's been reckless with money. Mr. Lawson stood, his voice sharp. Objection, hearsay. Judge Carter sustained it, striking Gary's statement. Next came Ellen Parker, a neighbor of Elaine's. Judy stopped helping her family out of nowhere, she said. It's not like her. Mr. Lawson cross-examined her. Have you ever spoken to Ms. Warren directly? He asked. Ellen faltered. No, just what Elaine told me. Another objection, another strike. Their witnesses were crumbling, and I felt a flicker of hope. Mr. Lawson called our first witness, Dr. Barbara Kleina, a psychiatrist who'd evaluated me after the social worker's visit. Ms. Warren is fully competent, Dr. Kleina said, her voice steady. She's articulate, manages a demanding job, and makes rational financial decisions. My assessment found no signs of erratic behavior. She presented her report. detailing our sessions and my clear-headed responses. Mr. Hayes tried to poke holes, asking about stress from my divorce. But Kleina didn't waver. Stress doesn't equal incapacity, she said. Ms. Warren's decisions are deliberate and sound. I took the stand next, my hands steady despite my nerves. I supported my family for years, I said, keeping my voice even. But when I realized they were using me, I set boundaries. That's not erratic, it's self-preservation. I handed Judge Carter my evidence, performance reviews from my job showing consistent promotions, bank statements reflecting stable savings, and emails from my employer confirming my reliability. Mr. Hayes pressed me, suggesting I'd acted out of spite. I acted out of necessity, I countered. They demanded money while excluding me from their lives. Judge Carter listened closely, his pen moving as he took notes. Mr. Lawson closed our case, his voice firm. Ms. Warren's family has no evidence of incapacity, only vague claims and hearsay. Her records and Dr. Kleina's evaluation prove her competence. This lawsuit is an attempt to manipulate her into compliance. Mr. Hayes argued back, but his points felt hollow, leaning on emotional pleas about family duty. Judge Carter called a recess, and I sat with Mr. Lawson, barely breathing. You did well, he whispered. We've got this. When court resumed, Judge Carter delivered his ruling. The plaintiffs have failed to provide credible evidence of Ms. Warren's incapacity, he said, his voice clear. Her financial decisions, supported by documentation and expert testimony, are rational. The case is dismissed. Relief flooded me, my shoulders sagging as Mr. Lawson squeezed my arm. Elaine and Clarence sat stunned, their faces pale. Mr. Hayes gathered his papers, avoiding my gaze. I'd won, not just the case, but my freedom from their control. As I left the courthouse, the weight of months lifted. I'd faced their accusations and proven them wrong. My life was mine again, and I wasn't letting anyone take it away. 3 months after the trial, I stood in my new apartment, watching the Buffalo skyline. The view was different here, higher, brighter, with the city's lights stretching out like a promise. I'd moved out of my old place, leaving behind the weight of family visits and accusations. This new space, with its clean walls and uncluttered rooms, felt like a fresh start. I'd spent the morning unpacking, arranging my books and a few plants, making it mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next demand. I'd signed up for a cooking class at a community center nearby, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. The instructor, a cheerful woman named Linda, taught us how to make pasta from scratch. My first attempt was lumpy, but I laughed as I rolled out the dough, flour dusting my hands. You're getting the hang of it, Linda said, giving me a nod. I felt a spark of pride, small but real. Cooking wasn't just about food, it was about building something for myself. Piece by piece, I'd already mastered a decent marinara sauce, and I was determined to tackle risotto next. My evenings were spent planning a solo trip, another step I'd never dared take before. I spread brochures across my dining table, circling destinations, Italy, maybe, or a quiet beach in Maine. I'd saved enough, thanks to the money I was no longer sending to my family. The idea of traveling alone, choosing my own path, felt exhilarating. I jotted down notes: a cooking school in Tuscany, a coastal hike in Acadia National Park. Each plan was a reminder that my life was my own now, not a resource for others to exploit. I'd heard through a mutual acquaintance that my parents and Elaine had moved into a cramped apartment on the edge of Buffalo. Elaine was working 2 jobs now, a cashier at a grocery store and a night shift at a diner, to cover their debts. They'd lost the lawsuit, and without my support, their lifestyle had crumbled. Part of me felt a pang, remembering the years I'd tried to keep them afloat, but that pang faded fast. They'd made their choices, just as I'd made mine. I didn't wish them harm, but I wasn't their safety net anymore. Sitting at my desk one night, I wrote in my journal, something I'd started after the trial. The words came slowly at first, then poured out. I wrote about the years I'd spent tying my worth to their needs, believing I had to earn their love with money. I'd thought being generous made me valuable, but it had only trapped me. The trial had forced me to see the truth. My value wasn't in what I gave others, but in who I was. Financial independence wasn't just about bank accounts, It was about freedom to live on my terms. I closed the journal, feeling lighter, like I'd finally set down a burden I'd carried too long. I invited Martha, Lois, and Evelyn over to see the new place. They arrived with a bottle of wine and warm smiles, filling the apartment with laughter. "This place suits you," Martha said, admiring the view. Lois raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said, and we toasted, the clink of glasses echoing in the room. Their support had carried me through the worst, and now they were here to celebrate the best. As we talked, I shared my travel plans, and Evelyn's eyes lit up. "You're going to love it," she said. "There's nothing like discovering the world on your own." As they left, I stood at the window again, the city glowing below. I thought about the lesson I'd learned through all this, not just about money, but about myself. I'd spent years letting others define my worth, but no more. My independence, my choices, my life, they were mine to shape. I wasn't just free from my family's demands. I was free to build a future that mattered to me, and that was worth everything.